Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm speaking with Ahmed Mohammed, who currently serves as the president of the Eritrean Afar National Congress, EANC, which is an exiled Eritrean Afar political organization dedicated to self-determination and self-rule for the Afar population in Eritrea. Ahmed is also the co-founder and vice president of the Can Go Afar Foundation, which is a humanitarian organization that works to address the needs of Afar communities in Ethiopia and the Eritrean Afar refugees in Ethiopia by providing advocacy, clean water, and post-secondary education. Ahmed now lives in Ottawa, Ontario, with his wife and 4 children, and has managed a successful business for 19 years. Ahmed, welcome to the channel.
Thank you, George. Thanks for the introduction. Pleasure to be here.
I appreciate it. To start, we know that in Eritrea there are a multitude of ethnic populations that live in the country. And you, as an ethnic Afar, represent a key minority figure in the population. Although a census in Eritrea has never officially been conducted before, an estimate provided by the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs suggests that the ethnic Afar population makes up about 4% of the total population of the country. Is this figure accurate based off of your experience living in the country or talking with others? And how can we come to understand the Afar population in Eritrea?
Yeah, I believe the current the situation currently who remain inside the country is accurate. That's about 400,000 Afar people we believe are currently exist inside Nankalia, which is a traditional homeland of Afar people. But we equally think the exodus of the Afar people from their homeland took toll. So we believe in excess of 200,000 Afar live outside Eritrea in surrounding regions.
And where are Afars located in Eritrea? What cultural and geographical traits define the Afar population?
That's very good. Thank you for that question, because that is the crook of what we promote as Afar people. Our traditional land is called Dankalia. This name was, it's an indigenous term coming from the Afar indigenous tribes that represents this group. This area is located in the southeastern. If you look at Eritrea's map, it will be located in the southern portion of Eritrea, facing Yemen and Saudi Arabia across the Red Sea.
And over time, the migration and the population of Afars has, of course, shifted throughout this small triangle that you described in the southern part of the country, as well as in Djibouti and Ethiopia. Could you provide a brief history and background of the Afar people?
Thank you. To begin with, the Afar are indigenous, one of the indigenous people inside Eritrea, and the traditional homeland, unfortunately, Dankalia, which we are referring to now, was colonized not just by Italy, but by other nations that had power at that time, beginning from the Ottoman Empire, the Portuguese, the Egyptians, and obviously the Italians in 1869. So at that time, the indigenous Afar people have occupied this region that is known as Dankalia. Dankalia, by the way, stretches from the northern tip of Massawa all the way to the northern tip of Rahaita, bordering Djibouti. Very strategic, very natural resource rich area inside Eritrea. Obviously, the colonialists at that time have known the value of this region and strategically stationed themselves. So when they arrived in the Afar coast of Dankalia, they have made deals with the Afar sultans, which the Afar used to be self-governing nations at that time. This is prior to the modern sovereignties that we are currently under, whether it's in Eritrea or Djibouti or Ethiopia. The Afar were known to these colonialist power, and they made agreement with the Afar people to settle here. And obviously, the Italian positioning of its military in ASAP created what we know as the modern day of Eritrea, which is by stationing their military there. Obviously, the Italians used the opportunity to stretch down the other part of Eritrea, and the first colonial installation was founded in Asab in 1865. Then it was called Colonia de Asab of Eritrea. I believe that's the way it was referred to in the history books. So, but throughout this time, like I said, the Afar maintained their political independence, their socio-economic independence, also have dealt with in neighborly fashion with all of other tribes, nations that live with them, including those who across the Red Sea. So brief history of Afar, looking at the time and current situation we find ourselves in. Relatively, the Afar were self-governing indigenous community back then.
And of course, during the height of the Eritrean Independence War that lasted throughout the 1960s through late 1980s, Afars, of course, made contributions to the effort of Eritrean independence. Could you describe in brief some of those accomplishments made?
Of course, at the time 1977, I believe, the inception of the liberation struggle, in fact, took place in the Afar territory, an area called Sidi Haela. This is where the current, as we know it, the 30 some years of liberation struggle. So the Afar were critical in providing access to the sea, since they knew the sea, knew the fishing, and had fishing boats, supported logistically by providing access to the military equipment, weapons, and those type of logistic support. Was Afar were critical in providing the those who were at the forefront of the so you know, there are a number of Afar heroes at the time, but prior to the military struggle for independence of Eritrea, the Afar obviously have people like Muhammad Umar Akito, who were the founding father of Eritreanness, rejected the colonization and rejected the oppression of Ethiopia, and were instrumental. The Afar figures like Mr. Akito, Sheikh Akito, were played the Eritreanness and instilled in the young Afar people like us to be proud Eritreans. And that was the contribution the Afar have provided historically.
And so now we come post-independence. In this period, we've seen a litany of human rights violations that have occurred in the country due to the government's malpractice of governing the citizenry. What is the environment like for Afars in the country? Of course, being an ethnic minority, there's additional burdens that the population has to face. How have they, in particular, been affected by national issues such as the indefinite military service and imprisonment?
Yeah, it's been tragic. Obviously, Eritrea's independence, to the Afar people, to those of us who are at the forefront of the Afar rights, has been nothing less than colonization. When the Eritrean independence happened, the Eritrea's new state, or the Eritrea's regime, the current Eritrean regimes, have suspicion coming to the Afar territory, even though the Afar sacrifice, as we spoke, has been historically there for the support of liberation struggle, but Eritrean military that running the country right now came with the suspicion that the Afar people are in fact the enemy by militarizing the Afar territory, which we spoke to about, is Dankalia from coast to coast, completely disallowing any form of activities, whether we engaging with as indigenous people, dealing with Afars in Djibouti or Afars in Ethiopia, or across the Red Sea with Yemen, and those type of political, social, economic relations was completely cut. Eritrea, Dankalia has been completely isolated from others, like from NGOs or any other type of support that maintained the Afars indigenous people have relied on relationship with other Afars and other ethnic groups to provide for themselves. So Eritrea came into this understanding of the Afar are hostile to the state, which we currently are still paying for. The isolation, the name calling, the marginalization, and the ethnic cleansing that we have seen since the Eritrea and Isaias Afwerki took power is unbelievable historic suppression of our people, our freedom of religion, rights of self-determination, our political or social, economic, everything has been destroyed by the current regime. So it has been, and this policy of isolation and policy of marginalization, economic and political, social marginalization, have been also supported by also continue to be the confiscation of the Afar lands and territorial rights, and confiscation of Afar property, strategic resources. As you may know, the killing of our fishermen on the sea, the destruction of our economic activities, bringing international actors like the United Nations, United Arab Emirates, and the Australian corporations, and those who our intention is to colonize with the help of Eritrean government the Afar territory and resources. And it has been nothing short of ethnic genocide on the Afar people.
You mentioned that since the government has taken over, a multitude of problems has arose, and among which mining, especially potash mining along the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia, has been pretty lucrative for the Eritrean government, and this has probably driven migration rates to historic levels, especially given the small population of the Afar that live in the country. Can you describe the contemporary history of Afar migration in the Horn of Africa and how that's changed since the current government has taken over?
So in order for us to highlight the what is driving the refugee crisis of the Afar people, let's look at the Eritrea's action. From the get-go, this state, this newfound state, have taken it upon itself to start conflict within its neighbors. Since 1995, as you know, there were conflict between Yemen and Eritrea in 1995, I believe it was in December, over the island of Hanish, and then continued to have a major outbreak of war between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and then again in 2008 against the Djibouti territory, that Djibouti island called Ras Dumera is clearly out of Eritrea's bound, and it's a Djibouti territory, and all of this is to say that Eritrea, as a nature, as a warmongering nation, as a bellicose nation that is always creating conflicts. So these conflicts, the primary target or the primary recipients of this violent conflict against their neighbors were the Afar people. So the Afar people have become, every time Eritrea creates a conflict within its neighbor, the Afar were forced to be displaced from their natural way of life, their economy, their kinship with other Afars across the borders. So with all these conflicts, the Afar became the refugees by the intentions of the Eritrean state. So Eritrean government have never included within its policy that creating a conflict like this, such as with the neighbors, would have a very negative impact in the population like the Afar. So this has been one of the one of the most important factors that created the Afar refugee crisis as we know it today. So this is what created, as you asked me, the migration of the Afar from Eritrea. Also by supported human rights violation, as we have documented years of human rights violation, including mass murder. Mass graves were found all over Eritrea. Like I said, the Afar, those who live in the coastal communities, are depend on fishing. So their fishing boats were confiscated. Those who dared to go to fishing on the sea, on the Red Sea, were shot dead by the United Arab Emirates and the Eritrean Navy. The Eritrean Navy personnel deliberately would stop the Afar carrying any food from either from Djibouti or from Yemen to support their families. They would find them 3 million or 4 or 5 million nakfas in one of these kangaroo courts run by these generals, in order for those who are unable to pay these fines were put in prison. So these people had to leave the country. Those who are lucky, many of those Afar are still incommunicado. We've lost relatives. Hundreds and tens and thousands of Afar people are still unaccounted for. Refugee crisis, as you know, in Ethiopia is one of the biggest camps in refugees in Isaita and Barale. It's almost 60,000 Afar UN registered Afar refugees in Ethiopia. Similarly in Yemen, and similarly in Djibouti. So these ethnic persecution, these crimes against humanity have led to the fleeing of tens of thousands of Afar people from their traditional homeland in Dankalia.
And as you describe some of this history, some who may support the Eritrean government or are suspicious of the claims that you mentioned would say, well, this is due to the national security of the country and that the Eritrean government is acting in the best interests of the people. How would you respond to something like that?
Of course, it's a farce, because the Eritrea, as you may know, have used the national security card to enlist and introduce the indefinite militarization of the country, which resulted in thousands of Eritreans have left, died in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea and the desert of Sinai deserts. This is because of the introduction of the Eritrea's government specifically to control its population, into putting them into this indefinite slavery, militarization of the country. Obviously, we know the fact that the whole idea of a national security was, in fact, to have led to accusing, of course, Ethiopia, this long time enemy, of retaking Eritrea, or Ethiopia's intention to colonize Eritrea again. We know this is a farce. We know this is false. As a result, we've just witnessed the Ethiopia and Eritrea agreement in 2018, You know, how can someone believe that if you're all of these years have used a militarization or a military subscription to enslave your own people, now all of a sudden you have a relation with the country that you have accused of taking your in the interest of your national security, but again you are using your people, enslaving your people in order for to create fear into the people that this country is not yet independent. This country needs a protection. This is why you are legitimizing the slavery of your enslaving of your young people. So for Eritrea to say the it's in the best interest of its national security, they're using this policy is completely incomprehensible, completely wrong for anyone to believe, whether it's the supporters in diaspora or the regime itself. This card is not playing, and every Eritreans understand why the regime is using the security card is to obviously to extend its political life to control Eritrean lives.
So you've described that even Afars who may feel that they're isolated from the rest of the country, they still understand or are in touch with the major issues that Eritreans in other parts of the country are having problems with. And so it kind of, you're suggesting that it kind of builds some sort of camaraderie or some sort of understanding between everyone, that Afars in many ways are just like others who live in the country, yet have their own specific challenges that they have to endure.
Absolutely. And the Afar are one of the most proudest Eritreans from the get-go. Like I said, through Afar, Eritrea was conceived. You know, many Eritreans forget that as a result of the Afar people, you know, of course, Afar put up fight against the colonial Europeans. You know, they sacrificed thousands and thousands. They did this alone. Nobody helped the Afar defending the territory which is called Eritrea. You know, nobody came to their defense. You know, this is prior to what we know as Eritrea as a nation. But you know, most Eritreans, older generation, understand the sacrifice of the Afar people. Without the Afar people, there would not be any Eritrea. And we obviously, when we highlight and talk about the Afar issues and the Afar persecution in the country, we completely understand what is going on in the rest of the Eritrean, what happened to the other nationalities. All we're saying is, you know, the Afar need to speak for the Afar people. You know, obviously, other Eritrean colleagues have also highlighted what is happening to the Afar, specifically to the Afar in Konamas, and we appreciate that. But we have an extra duty to highlight what's going on to the Afar people, and you know, this is it's really appreciated, and we completely understand what others are also doing on their behalf.
So, Ahmed, when Afars leave Eritrea as refugees, where are the most likely places that they settle in the region? Previous literature on Afar migration has suggested that Djibouti and Ethiopia are primary locations, but there are probably specific areas in those countries that Afars live in, and you probably have good insight on that information.
Yeah, it's the primary attraction for the Afar refugees have, of course, been Ethiopia in the past, and obviously some settled in Djibouti and Yemen as well, and some as far as Sudan. But the primary country of safety for the Afar has been Ethiopia. It's because the relatively closeness of the border. It's the border with the Afar, and the Afar live in this and both sides of the borders, obviously. So it's most of our refugees have been settled and UN recognized refugees, refugees, are in the two camps of, like I said, in Barahle and Aisaita, within the Afar regional state in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, since the agreement between the Ethiopia and Eritrea in 2018, that safety for our refugees have been dwindling. In fact, right now, the Afar inside Ethiopian refugee camps are increasingly being neglected by interference from the Eritrean government. And there was several attempts by Eritreans to kidnap. In fact, they did kidnap some Afar who fled Eritrea, and the refugee, as a result of Eritrea's interference, the refugee rations in the Ethiopian camps have been destroyed. I mean, completely are not their registration is not happening since the signing of the agreement. The new registration, I mean, for Afar refugees who seeking asylum in Ethiopia has stopped. Conflicts within the Eritrea created conflict in Tigray have also triggered displacements of thousands of Afar refugees. Many of them died as the conflict was raging in Tigray. But this is to say, since the agreement, the rights of Afar refugees inside Ethiopia has been completely curtailed to the point that they are in the starvation as we speak.
Transitioning to current events, in February of 2022, the UN Refugee Agency stated that the whereabouts of thousands of Eritrean refugees remained unknown after their camp came under attack in Ethiopia's northern Afar region, which borders the Tigray region. 5 Eritrean refugees were reportedly killed by gunmen raiding a refugee camp. Additionally, the United Nations reported that armed men entering the Barahle refugee camp urged some 20,000 Eritrean refugees to flee for their lives. Of those, more than 4,000 went the long distance to Samarra. What communication have you had regarding these and other incidents, and what insight can you bring into the more recent violence that has occurred to Eritrean refugees in Afar?
So those refugees are hosted in a place called Sardo refugee camp. This is the newest camp. It's hosting about, like you said, about 4 to 5,000 refugees. The area is very hostile, very hot. The conditions of the refugees, as they reported to us, are very dire. Lack of food, lack of shelter, water, lack of medication, and other basic necessities for children and weak and women and elderly to be supported. So the conditions of those refugees are very grim. Also, there was a camp in Aisaita that is one of the first camps that was established. Also, the situation is very similar. Registrations for the newcomers have stopped. Rations are only given. They used to be receiving like 12 or 15 kilos of wheat per household, per family, per person, I mean, and that has stopped. Now they only giving them assistance for 2 kilos of wheat per person, which is and that assistance is not even coming on a monthly basis. Sometimes it takes 2-3 months to receive this aid, and this leaves this leads to multitude of problems, including malnutrition, health situation deteriorating. Many we've heard many children have died because of malnutrition in the camp. So it's very grim situation. The dire situation is getting worse as we speak.
And in light of this news and the conflict that's occurring in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, how has the Afar population in particular, both Eritrean refugees who are Afar that left the country and Ethiopian Afars, how have they been affected by the conflict?
very negatively. I mean, to begin with, this is the area that was very had no significant infrastructure or health centers or clinics and other things there. But the war situation, let alone to the place like the Afar regional state. But we can see it in modern European countries like Ukraine and Russia situation. We are seeing devastation of war everywhere. But to come back to the Eritrea's involvement in this war, since the war broke out, obviously the Afar who reject this war, they do not want to participate in this war from the Eritrean soldiers have left Eritrea, and they came to the safety of Afar regional state. Like I said, after signing of this peace agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea, Eritrea now have complete access to the Afar region. Their intelligence or their security service come to the Afar region uncontrolled. They have abducted Afars who have fled the military from the military participation inside Tigray, and those people were unfortunately taken. And we were able to save 18 of the 54 Afar soldiers, the Eritrean Afar soldiers who fled to Ethiopia for safety with the help of United Nations. But unfortunately, 36 or more were taken by force, were kidnapped by Eritrean officials back to Eritrea. So obviously, Afar life, especially Eritrean Afar life and safety is in big question inside the Afar territory in Ethiopia.
And how common are these incidents of territorial violence against displaced peoples in war? How would you quantify that? Is it an occurrence that happens all the time during conflict, or are soldiers usually protective of civilians? What's your understanding of this?
Yeah, I think Eritrea is using the loophole of what the opening that is provided to her using the conflict in Ethiopia. Obviously, when the war situation is happening, the international community's eye is to perhaps to stop the war between the warring factions. But Eritrea is obviously playing its role, as always been, going under the radars of the international eyes and kidnap the Afar and other Eritrean refugees, and they are using this opportunity to come in. And as you know, the United States and other nations have told Eritrea to pull out of Ethiopia, but they completely denied it, and they continue to deny their involvement in Tigray as we speak now. I mean, this is a nation that has disregard for international law and humanitarian law, and continues to be the single major factor of instability in the region, and all of us Eritreans have known this in for many years, but unfortunately the international community is coming to know that Eritrea's role, and Eritrea needs to be punished for its role, not only in its conflict in this causing havoc in Ethiopia's internal affairs, but also in the lives of undemocratic, completely human a catastrophe, a humanitarian crisis that are causing to its own people inside Eritrea.
So, Ahmed, some people who may raise an argument against the points you've made would suggest that Eritrea is not the only military actor involved in the conflict, and other parties have political interests that they want to pursue. This may be with respect to Afar issues as well, but the main points of concern for the Eritrean government would be that those who stand against what they perceive to be national security don't really understand what's happening in the Tigray region. And as a result, those who stand in opposition to what the Eritrean government is doing are seen as not credible. First, how would you respond to those criticisms, or those who may say that the points that you raise are not adequate? And also, how does the Afar population fit into this whole complicated mess of warring factions? We, of course, have heard from many different Tigrayan diaspora, as well as Eritrean and other parts of Ethiopia diaspora populations, but the Afars have been marginalized in the country as well. And with that lack of clarity of the situation due to no media access, how would you take all of this and kind of formulate a response to the general notion that Eritrea's involvement is justified?
Yeah, nothing uh, can be justified by involving yourself in war. If Eritrea, we have to go back only the past 20 years when Ethiopia and Eritrea was in no war and no peace situation. We've known, as Eritreans, we lived under the current tyrant system, and nothing has changed within the country. If speaking as an Afar from Eritrea, I do not want to get into Ethiopian internal affairs. It's not none of my business, but as Afar Eritreans, we know the Eritrea's intention was not to be from the point of defending its national security. It was to basically destroy its natural enemy. That's what Eritrea had said about the Tigrayan TPLF and its leadership, and this is why Eritrea got involved. But for simply to justify Eritrea's involvement in the military conflict in Ethiopia is from my perspective and perspective of those of us inside Dankalia, is to have this is a nation, this is a state, this is a government that strives in conflict. Like I said, from the beginning, it has created conflict with all of its neighbors, including Djibouti and Yemen and Sudan and Ethiopia. And for Eritrean military machine to continue to conscript and get we've seen people, 67, 70-year-old Eritreans who were pushed into this war, farmers, fishermen, and others who were just taken by force and pushed into this war. Eritrea thrives in this hostilities. It thrives in bloodshed and things like this. So this is in the interest of Eritrean regime to continue to be involved in this situation. And it's unfortunate there are those who are in the diaspora who support the government, but I think their views are coming from their hatred for what is, as we see, against Tigrayans, and perhaps that's where they're coming from. But for those of us Eritreans who wants to get rid of this tyrannical system, we don't believe Eritrea's involvement in Ethiopia's conflict is to protect this national security and sovereignty.
What can you say about the situation with regard to increased mobilization across the country? Are Afars at risk of further discrimination in the armed forces?
Yeah, we have seen as a result of this third round of conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region, it has been an increased mobilization of Eritreans. Obviously, it has been increased of detention of our people. We've reported as ENC. We've released a press release of capturing over 100 Afar fishermen who were minding their business, and they had nothing to do with the war in Ethiopia. They were kidnapped and they were detained, and they were basically sent to fight the war that does not involve them in Ethiopia. And completely, as you know, the roundups in Eritrea is from coast to coast. The Afar are paying the price. This is why we're seeing, in fact, the refugee influxes refugee crisis that is triggered in Yemen and in Djibouti and elsewhere is as a result of this militarization and military conflict that's going on in Ethiopia.
And have more Afars been recruited into the Eritrean military since the press statements released that you've mentioned?
Yes, we have information that many of those, in fact, we've seen those who were captured in Tigray. There were some of them were Eritrean soldiers were on Afar people were involved, and we believe at the source of this refugee crisis that we're seeing in Djibouti it's driven by the military conflict going on in Ethiopia.
Well, in closing, I'd like to ask more about the organization that you represent, EANC, which promotes activity of the Eritrean diaspora, in particular the Afar population, to establish a connection with other institutions focused on addressing issues that matter for Eritreans, which at the base includes relief support. So how has EANC worked with other Eritrean civil society organizations for the goodwill of Eritreans, both Afar and those who are other ethnic groups?
Yeah, very good question. As far as the before I get to the ENC and our work with the other democratic oppositions in the diaspora, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Djibouti authorities on the allowing Eritrean Afar refugees to be accepted as refugees in Obok, which is currently hosting for Eritrean Afar refugees. This is refugees that fled this ethnic persecution inside Eritrea. Currently their number is 104, have been 104 families have been registered. There are another 200 Afar refugees that are looking for protection and asylum seekers in the country, in Obok. And we want to encourage the Djiboutian authorities to continue to give safety and protection to the Afar refugees. We completely support and we understand our government have been very negative and very hostile to Djibouti authorities, including the Ras Dumera conflict that took place in 2008, and we in fact one day we want to see this relationship between the Eritrean democratic Eritreans that sees the Afar have self-determination inside Eritrea in Dankalia, and we want to build in a relationship with the Djibouti, our neighborly nations, including Djibouti and Yemen and Ethiopia. So this way there would not be any conflict between our two nations, and we really are thankful for the protection of our refugees inside Djibouti. To come back to your point on the work that we do as Eritrean Afar National Congress, we have been in exile since our democratic organization was formed in 2014. Since then, we have worked with a number of Eritrean opposition groups, mainly in the democratization of Eritrea. What kind of Eritrea we are trying to build? Our discussion have been on the constitutional reform that guarantees and respects the rights of minorities, indigenous people. How can a federal democratic Eritrea that prospers can protect the rights of all of its nationalities? How can we share power? How can we share resources in a way that we don't see conflict as we see in other parts of Africa? Once we get rid of this regime, in fact, we need to work from today, not wait for the downfall of the regime to envision and to have these democratic principles. So we are working currently with those who are wants to see Eritrea multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-regional democratic Eritrea that protects all the rights of Eritrean citizens. And we also want to we work with those who are see the rights of self-determination of Afar people are restored. As we said, the Afar have been self-governing nation prior to Eritrea's independence, and we want to see that rights restored to the Afar people. And basically, we are part of the Eritrean in ENCDC, it's called, umbrella Eritrean group comprised of 19 political organizations, some civic organizations. We continue to work with those civic movements like YAKL and others in terms of providing food and basic necessities to refugees in the refugee camps. We continue to promote the Afar right in every possible, in every platform, as including yours, to promote the rights of our people. And we wanted to see this country that has a great potential. We are only 5 million people, and the country is endowed in massive opportunities, natural resources, our strategic coast, as you know, the potash that are critically important for Eritrean economy is at the hands of Eritrean tyrant, and others are Russians and others who are coming to exploit our interest and the rights of Eritreans. And we need to come together and fight this as a unit, and to really has been the progress has been slow, as so many groups have so many views of Eritrea, but to really those who live in democratic nations like Canada, United States, and the European Union have seen the benefit of protecting and the rights of all of our citizens, including Afar. So we believe that it's in the best interest of all Eritreans to protect each other's right, so we can see Eritrea a democratic, prosperous, and in peace with its own citizens and in the region. So that has been the work of ENC, and we will continue to do those work on behalf of our people.
And so you're fostering a community with other Eritreans in order to build a more democratic and prosperous society, as you mentioned. First of all, how would you set yourself apart from other points in time when Eritrean diaspora organizations tried to coalesce and bring themselves together to resist the Eritrean government?
In order for us to, as opposition groups in diaspora, like I said, it's the views and missions of each organization is different. But obviously, we all agree in terms of removing the regime. We all agree this regime is a cancerous regime for Eritreans and for the region and for international community as a whole. So we agree on that point. The point that of contention has been so far is that what kind of Eritrea we want to build. Simply by removing the tyrant is not going to provide any source of security to all of marginalized and displaced communities such as the Afar. So in order for us to go forward, we need to have and principles, agreed upon principles, and a constitutional model that protects the rights of all of us. This means, if you may know the constitutional debate that is being going on in 1997 Constitution. We believe the 1997 Constitution is marginalized and not federal constitution that protects the rights of all of Eritreans. So we are in discussion with a number of Eritrean opposition groups to come to their senses and saying, look where you live. Nations like United States and Canada and others, you have benefited. All of us have benefited in protecting the rights of indigenous and minorities and those who are the peripheries of the central state. Building the nation from the center is not going to provide security and safety and development economically, socially, politically to the rest of those who see themselves have historic grievances of marginalization in the country. So the Afar are saying, we are in fact leading voices to bring about this change, we need to come to our senses. We need to come to the terms that we need to draft a constitution that belongs to the people, that protects the rights of people, and that Eritrea is a wealthy nation. If we were to be understanding that nation building cannot come in the expense of the marginalized communities, and that's why we need to come to understanding that we need to draft that document that is going to bring us all together as Eritreans, so everyone can benefit from democracy, from self-rule, from sharing of natural resources, and all of the examples are here within the countries that we live in. So it's only going to take courageous people to say enough is enough. We are one people. Of course, we are one people. We are diverse people. We need to protect the rights of each nationalities and each historic background that we bring as a nation, as a united nation. This is the way that we're going to be able to move forward from post the Eritrean dictatorship.
Ahmed, I'd like to give you the final word.
Well, thank you very much, George, and for this opportunity. I really admire as a young Eritrean. So what you do is very helpful and healthy for all of us, and we always speak to our own closer ears, as you know. Those who speak Afar speak with the Afar communities, those who speak Tigray or Arabic to their own constituent. But it is very important that platforms like this, we have to involve others. Preparing a program, English program like this will help others to understand, not just Eritreans, but international community will understand the situation. This complicated nation that we call Eritrea. This is a nation that is built with the blood and sweat and sacrifice of all of our people, all of our 9+ ethnicities, and that's a kind of nation that we want to build. My message to fellow Eritreans: number one, we need to understand each other. We have been struggling how to come together as a nation. I think the way to go forward is to understand everyone's grievances, and we need to listen to each other. No one is giving other nation or other people their rights. Our rights are our collective rights. So we need to understand Eritrea has become a country. It's no one can take away that from Eritrea. But how do we move from that point forward? We need to continue to say, how can we build a nation? Now, state building has been accomplished, but the state building cannot come at the expense of marginalized communities and people like Afar and Kunamas and Sahos, whoever they're marginalized. We are diverse nation. We need to continue to work together as a nation that can be example, and the coastal Red Sea, one of the most strategic corner of Africa. And this country, if we was to be governed in the right democratic way, we will achieve our dreams and aspirations to democratize our nation. So I want pass thank you to you and to those who are listening to this program. We need to come closer to work together and see to work together and remove this tyrannical system that is currently creating havoc in our country. And we're thankful for all of you, and we are looking forward to work with everyone.
Ahmed, thank you.
Thank you very much.